Okay, I was accidentally connected to a Bluetooth. Okay, I was accidentally connected to a Bluetooth for a moment there. Hopefully you can hear me now. Am I coming in clear now? I still have my earpods out, I guess. Can you hear me now? Am I coming in clear? Good. Glad to see everybody. This is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel where we answer all your questions related to history and social studies, different topics. This is our weekend Ask Me Anything Q&A where you can ask me about any historical topics or social studies you would like. We start this off Friday nights. We had a nice session last night and we're keeping it going with our second part today. We will be bringing you quality history topics for the next hour or so. So anything you would like to ask related to social studies, social sciences, geopolitics, past and present, it's what we do here at the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. I am joining you from our new Friendly Neighborhood History studio where we have just been relocating and we are finally getting into the theme of things. We finally have new lighting. We don't have mics yet, but I've got my smoking jacket on. I'm in a good mood. I've got my coffee. So grab something nice to drink, something cold, maybe something warm, whatever you are in the proclivity for, and come and talk about history with me. Drop a comment or a topic or a question you have about social studies. Consider liking and subscribing and becoming a friendly neighborhood historian. It's as easy as that. So that's what we do, and that's what we're going to be doing for the next hour or so. And consider joining us on our live stream lecture tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we will be talking about the history of the English Civil War, and a special one, our first ever 4 back-to-back live stream lecture. We will be doing our live stream. We will be doing a lecture on Monday about the life and legacy of the great Dr. Martin Luther King. So, Elvo, great to see you, is asking, did Rome beat Hannibal or did Carthage betray him? Well, I think Rome beat Hannibal at what Hannibal was best at beating Rome at. Hannibal spent like 12 years going up and down the entire peninsula of Italy, wreaking havoc on the Romans, using his elephants to bully them around and using mercenaries and local people who wanted to rebel against the Romans. This is what the Carthaginians were always good at, almost like a guerrilla warfare, proto-guerrilla warfare. And just fighting them on their own front and just wanted to batter them until they would surrender. And the Romans under Scipio Africanus did the same thing by attacking in his own native land and taking the fight to Hannibal. So the Romans realized they couldn't defeat Hannibal head to head in Italy because he just kept averting them. But they realized if they could go down into Africa and force him to go back, they could rally their support and attack him. So I don't know if he was betrayed by Carthage. It just seems like he kind of ran out of gas, and the Romans had the right strategy. They turned the tables on Hannibal. As they said in The Office, oh, how the turns have tabled. So anyways, yes, a very original trill. Yes, I am whatever you say that I am. But this is the Friendly Neighborhood History channel, and I am a historian with a master's in history, so I'm here to answer any questions you have pertaining to history. But Elvo, I hope that answered your question. And if you guys enjoyed what you just heard me talking about Hannibal and the Romans, consider liking and subscribing. We're in our new studio. We have our new lighting. We're trying to build the channel as much as we can this year. We had a really great year last year in 2024. We're coming up on our year anniversary, so appropriate for a history channel. Our year anniversary is President's Day weekend, so we'll be doing a lot of special stuff around then that I'm really looking forward to. So thank you for joining the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. If you have a history topic or a social studies topic you'd like to ask a question about or bring up, I'm here for me. Yeah, here for you. Yeah, I added a little bit too much half and half. That's because I don't have any brown sugar. Usually I'll put in brown sugar and I'll have my coffee a little darker than this, something like that. So, I mean, I'll put a little bit of half and half and then a teaspoon of brown sugar, and then I've got it black like that too. So yeah. What's your thoughts on homosexuals in history? I'm glad we're asking about that. Apparently that's the big thing now. So obviously there have been gay people all throughout human history. There have been people who were obviously, I think that as culture becomes more accepting of homosexual behavior, I think that it's easier for people to actually live a gay lifestyle. And this is true not just in the American, if you will, the American Empire, but also in the Roman Empire. As the centuries progressed, the Roman Empire became more and more accepting of homosexual behavior, just as the ancient Greeks had been. And the Romans actually, because they became more and more accepting, it became more and more open and more common for people to be gay. So in cultures where there was a repression of homosexual lifestyle based on social or religious norms, you had a smaller percentage of the population actually claiming to be gay. That doesn't mean that a lot of those people weren't gay. It just meant that they weren't acting out their sexuality, at least openly. So I think that a more significant percentage of the world's population would have been gay if it had been more socially acceptable 500 years ago, 600 years ago, 700 years ago. And there have been homosexuals all throughout history, gay and lesbian rulers and kings, and all sorts of things that we see all throughout history. I mean, the term lesbian the ancient Greeks were very well aware of homosexuality, but not just with men, which was more common with the ancient Greeks. They also knew about lesbians because the term lesbian comes from the island of Lesbos off the coast of the eastern part of Greece, and there was a colony of women who would engage in sexual activity with each other. So because of that, yeah. So homosexuality has been common throughout human history. It's just part of the human experience. And to answer everybody's questions, even though I don't like to get too personal here because I am your channel, literally, for bringing you historical information, no, I am not gay. But thanks for asking. Very original of you, and I remember when I was 15, so there you go. Yes. So anyways, what's the oldest civilization that still exists today? I'd say Persia has a long-standing history. I think Greece, they aren't exactly in the same form that they were originally. Persia has become Iran and is now a modern radical Islamic state rather than a sultanate or an empire as they've been throughout most of their history. If you study Persian history, you'll find out that throughout most of their history, they were ruled by a king, sultan, or emperor known as the Shah. And in 1979, that streak ended with the rise of the mullahs and the ayatollahs in radical Islam with the fall of Shah Reza Pahlavi in 1979. So the Persians have one of the oldest societies. The Jews have some of the oldest civilizations, although they weren't always in the land that they originally were from, and the Greeks. Actually, now that I think about it, the Chinese have the most ancient civilization, and they have the longest continual streak, because Mesopotamia, those ancient civilizations aren't necessarily modern-day Iraq, but China is still China. So China is probably the most ancient civilization, at least in my opinion. So thank you for joining the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. If you like learning about history and you like my answer to that last question, you like what I'm talking about, or you like my smoking jacket, or you like the way I hold my coffee mug, consider liking and subscribing and becoming a Friendly Neighborhood Historian. Saber, is good to see you. Have you searched the CIA Operation 1? They were to take over the media operation. Mockingbird is all over. Yes, I looked at Able Danger, and contrary to what some people thought, like my great moderator, Simon the Bunny, who is not with us today, yes, there are these information. I need to read a little bit more about it. But basically these operations where the military tries to see how much of American society they can actually control, and they were simulations and things like that, but who knows how deep they actually went. So, yeah. Am I Amish? Well, clearly I'm not Amish. I'm using a light and a phone. Well, Roman, you have poor taste. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And if Flo, great to see you. Get a job. Well, it's the weekend, so I'm not working, so joke's on you. And thank you, Johnny. Yes, this is exactly my Hugh Hefner drip, although I don't have any bunnies or playmates around, so sorry, guys. You're not going to get a treat of that. I do have a pipe, though. No offense, but the robe is, yeah, whatever. You get your opinion. No, it's not AI generated, and I actually take that as a compliment. It means that I'm actually spewing information the way an AI machine would do so, which means I'm spitting a lot. So, from Bangladesh, great to see you. We have people who join us from all over the world in different channels and different streams. We have people from India. We have people from, like this wonderful person, Hanif, is from Bangladesh. We also have people from Sweden and Finland, Russia, Great Britain. My wonderful moderator, Simon the Bunny, is from Great Britain. I'm from the United States. I don't get specific about where I'm from, and I don't usually get specific about my sex life, but apparently I had to get that specific. So anyways, let's go capture Greenland and Canada. So I was actually reading today, and I'm going to make a video about it, with Donald Trump coming back into the White House and having his eye on Greenland and wanting to buy it from Denmark, the biggest part of the Trump foreign policy so far. Greenland, actually, the U.S. occupied it during World War II because the Nazis were there and they wanted to deter the Nazis. And so they actually wanted to capture, the U.S. did capture Greenland, and then after World War II, President Truman tried to buy it off of the Danes, and they refused. So that's why Denmark still owns Greenland, and they have ever since Leif Erikson discovered it in the, or Eric the Red discovered and settled parts of it. The Norwegians also settled parts of it. So it's gone back and forth between the Norwegians and the Danish. The U.S. did take it over during World War II when Denmark was occupied by the Nazis. And then after the war, the U.S. tried to buy it, and it wasn't successful with that. So there's some interesting history there. Donald Trump is not the first president to try to buy the large land off of the coast of Canada for the United States and make it another part of the American sphere of influence. It has been part of the American sphere of influence before. Let's see if the Danish say yes this time. So. Yes, the Greek poet Sappho. That's true. My name is. So lesbianism. It refers to anyone, usually women, who have an attraction towards women. So let's see. I'm going in order. So if you don't see your answer copied, or you don't see your answer yet, please be patient. I'm going through this as quickly as I possibly can. I don't have my moderators today, but if you like learning about history, then you're in the right place. Put your questions down, and I promise to get to them as quickly as I possibly can. I'm also scrolling with a cup of coffee in my hand. So Kai is asking, but if you were gay, would you do Danny DeVito? I think everyone would. Come on. I am shutting up, and I am subbing my med tea. Since I'm doing what you say, you might want to consider subscribing. From Tunisia, great to see you. Ghost Lord, I really appreciate that. You are loved too. We are a loving place here in the Friendly Neighborhood History Channel. What about Afghanistan? Definitely one of the oldest, but the modern state of Afghanistan did not emerge until 1747 when the Pushtun tribe united everybody and became kings over them. But there were empires in Afghanistan, like the Timurid and the Bakhtari Empire, that stretched back thousands of years. Alexander the Great conquered them and Hellenized them, bringing Greek culture, religion, art, and language to them in the 4th century BC. So the Afghans were also part of the Parthian Empire. They've been part of different civilizations, but they definitely are one of the oldest, but they're not. They are very much a tribal society, more so than others that I mentioned, like the Chinese. Okay. Thank you, Hudat. I hope you are sticking around and learning something. Oliver, I'm sorry. I like you, though. Ryan, great to see you as always. Always a pleasure to have Ryan here. He is a loyal Friendly Neighborhood historian. And by the way, you can also find more exclusive and sooner content and behind the scenes footage and stuff like that on my Patreon. And if you don't like the sound of my voice or the way I look and you just want to read my thoughts about history, join my Substack as well. It's Friendly History stuff or Friendly Neighborhood. I don't have the tags in the chat, but yeah. Ryan's asking and Ryan would know because he is a loyal Friendly Neighborhood historian. What's your thoughts on artists like Bekinski? Do you think art like that will become more known? I've always found the fact someone surviving a war just to be murdered at old age is sad. Yeah, it is sad. I don't know a lot about that type of art, so I'd have to learn more. Elavu, great question. Why did Italy fall? And Elavu has been with us since the beginning. He's one of my good friends and one of the most important people to this channel. And whenever he is here, I am just very happy because he always has some of the best questions. Alva Vu, and that's why he's Sigma. But anyways, as the kids say, why did Italy fail in Africa in World War II? I think the British and the Americans basically pushed Italy out, and that's what brought the Germans in. And Italy was actually the first chemical weapon usage on civilians was the British and the Italians on the Ethiopians and the Italians during World War II in 1930. In 1935, Mussolini was actually pretty successful. He'd already taken over Libya, and then he invaded Ethiopia and overthrew a long-standing empire that had been there for supposedly thousands of years. That was led by a man named Haile Selassie. Selassie went to the League of Nations and complained about what happened and stood up for his people and helped rally the allies to his cause, and they put him back on the throne, and he became the Messiah of the Rastafari religion, who believes that he is the second coming of Jesus Christ. So Italy failed in Africa basically because, just like the Austro-Hungarian Empire in World War I, they just didn't have the wherewithal that the other big players had. They didn't have the supplies, they didn't have the forces, and eventually they didn't have the chutzpah to continue fighting like the Germans and the Japanese did. Hello, thank you for joining us. I didn't get braces because my parents didn't want them. I am in this so that I can get monetized, so I can get money, so I can get Invisaligns. There you go. So let's see here. Everybody is a critic. I'm just going to do my thing, shake it off, all that good stuff. Second time here, and this gay thing always coming up, have respect and learn something. Thank you, Jocelyn, and I'm glad to see you again. In case no one has said thank you for the love, Ghost Lord. Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining us. From London. Let me see here. In 2014, I was involved in a drunk... Well, James, hopefully they've got a tail on you, and they'll be able to find you. Hello, welcome for joining that. Joining? Have you ever caught... no. Let me see here. In Are you Italian? Yes, I actually am Italian, as a matter of fact, Derek. So thank you for asking the first actual question that isn't disgusting troll stuff about my sexuality or physical appearance. So I appreciate that. Jamie, no, you may not, but you may subscribe and you'll get the same sensation, I'm sure. Can you please give me a shout out? Uh-huh. Hilarious, Serial. Imagine a career day at the local grade school. How would you convince the kids to become historians? Oh, Global, I really love this. Thank you. It's great to see you, Global. Global's always here, one of our loyal, friendly neighborhood historians. Basically, I'll talk a little bit slower for Oliver's sake so that he can actually understand what I'm saying. So if I was at a local school and I was asked to explain that I was trying to convince the kids to become historians, I would say, imagine that you could know all of these things about who we are as people, and imagine you can know all of these secrets, and you can dig in these places, and you can discover, you can look through human remains and find something significant. And imagine that you could be like Indiana Jones in this field of archaeology and study, and you can do that just by looking on your phone or reading a book or watching a video, by learning about history, by delving into archaeology, by delving into the past. You can learn about ancient people who lived thousands of years ago, who were just boys and girls just like you, who dealt with just very different things. And do you know what? The Egyptian kids were allowed to drink beer because they were working so hard. So I'd start off with a couple facts like that. I would also try to smooth them into this idea of being archaeologists, being like Indiana Jones, and you know, I don't think it would appeal to everybody, but it's the best I could do. I'd have to work more on it, but it's an interesting idea. How do we make history come alive? Well, we explain this is exactly the challenge that Global just mentioned. We make history come alive by explaining to everyone that it is the story and study of the human condition and what it means to be human. And so things don't just happen by accident. History is about ideas. So maybe I would actually start these kids off by asking, what's a good idea you've had recently? And what's a bad idea you've had? And have them share it. And then I would say, history is about ideas. And then I would give a few examples of these ideas. Columbus's bad and wrong idea that India was a lot closer. He didn't think the earth was flat, like they like to say. He actually believed it was a lot closer, but it was westward. And he was technically correct. He just he didn't go far enough. And he believed he had landed in India. And because of that, the Europeans settled the New World. So history is about ideas. Ideas move things forward. Some people, throughout all of human history, it was okay to own other people. And the new idea that came out of just in the last couple centuries is that it's not okay to do that. So Global, I would talk about history being about ideas, about being a human condition, knowing all sorts of things about how humans think and how they act and what they want. You can basically study all sorts of human behavior just through doing history. So I think I would start off there. I'd have some funny anecdotes like the stuff about the Egyptian kids drinking beer, and yeah. Oliver, I haven't had one yet. I hope you enjoyed my slowed down one. Used to, good to see you from Ireland. Always great to see you. No, I didn't. I wouldn't do that, Jamie. I wouldn't do it. I don't like weed eaters. I have video proof. What's a Hughes favorite? I don't know what you mean. They say Biden is a Mason. Yeah, they say that about a lot of powerful figures. Den, I've heard people say that political figures and leaders are Masons for a long time. Are you African American? No. I think you can probably tell that. That's probably a troll question. I don't even know why I answered that. How in history have countries made the gays go away? Well, in ancient Greece, they welcomed homosexual relationships. And like I mentioned, I was talking about the island of Lesbos. In Rome, in ancient Rome, particularly during the imperial time, it didn't matter if you were gay. As long as you were sexually active, you could actually move up into the government. So it's not always been common to shun gay people, but medieval and early modern societies, particularly Christian societies and Muslim societies, have shunned homosexuality as a practice because they believe it contradicts the instructions that God gave to them. And gays are still unfortunately shunned in many places of the world, where either they have to hide their identity, or if they practice their identity, they may be open to all sorts of disparagements, and who knows, maybe even harassment and attack. So, Doggy, so great to see you. Always a pleasure. Sankey's asking, what's the most historically significant event of our time? Something that future generations will learn in history books. If I were to say in the 21st century, it's close. COVID-19's up there. Trump getting elected in the first place, and Obama getting elected, and I think 9/11. But I think 9/11 kind of stands above all of those other ones, just maybe a tier above it. Thoughts on England invading Ireland? Well, I'm going to be talking about how England finally managed to conquer Ireland under the interregnum of Oliver Cromwell, how all these English kings had tried to subjugate Ireland for all these centuries and had failed, and it was actually Parliament that succeeded in conquering Ireland in 1655. I'm going to be talking about that tomorrow, so join us for the live stream lecture at 4 p.m. Eastern. But the truth of the matter is, England was trying to do that for a long time. And it was really this taste of colonization, and that's why perhaps the British Empire had the largest overseas empire, and they had the largest navy, and they needed to rely on their navy. That was their crowning achievement. But they had the largest empire with all of these lands like India and South Africa and Egypt and of course Ireland and originally the United States and Canada, because they needed to compensate for having a smaller amount of land than the rest of the Europeans. And there's this common political, geopolitical, and social scientific debate amongst the British people throughout their history about, are they Europeans or are they British, and how much of Europe is in a Brit and how much of a Brit is in Europe. Throughout the 1800s, they basically told the Europeans to do whatever they wanted on the continent as long as they could go around colonizing places like India and Africa. So the truth of the matter is, the British, the English, and later the British have this notion of themselves, knowing that they're on an island, this very self-conscious notion that they need to go and conquer other areas and subjugate them and extract material resources in order to be on a level playing field with larger European countries with more land and resources and people like France, Spain, and Germany. The interesting truth of the matter is that Britain would overcome all of them because of the scale of their empire, backed up by that really powerful navy. And Oliver, if you've liked the speed I've slowed down it, maybe consider liking and subscribing. But that was a great question. I used to. So, the organization behind direct energy weapons attacks in all form are dual agents. I've heard about that. I actually want to read more into energy weapons. I've heard about it on the channel before. I've done a little research, and these things are really deadly. So, Saber, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I haven't drunk much of it because I've had so many great questions. I'm doing what I can, though. Can you discuss the war in the Middle East? Let me take a sip of the coffee. It's coming to an end, at least a ceasefire, a temporary end right now. Israel and Hamas. This war has gone on for a long time. As long as the Jews have had a state in the Middle East, this has been irksome and dispossessed land that was occupied by Arabs in the Arab-Israeli War of 1948. There hasn't been able to be a settlement between the Arabs and the Palestinians and the Jews. And that has led to many different conflicts like the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, and of course the October 7th War, which may be coming to an end, but we don't know. Do we really trust a terrorist organization like Hamas? And at this point, do a lot of people even trust Israel to follow through with their side of it? So it's a religious difference, it's a cultural difference. And I think there's a lot of, when they look at Israel, and Israel's the only successful democracy, the only liberal democracy, the only pro-LGBTQ country, pro-women country in the Middle East, to an extent. When Muslims and Middle Easterners look at Israel, they see the West. They see imperialism, they see the British, they see the French, and they see the United States, and they resent that greatly, and they see those countries defending Israel, so they resent it even more. So there's this, so Israel represents something more than just a hatred of the Jewish religion and the Jews having their own state, but they hate that too. And the Jews, there's a lot of hatred from Jews towards Arabs and Muslims too, if we're being fair here. So, I can't do the pinkies up thing and hold the cup steady. Is it true that Obama is Arab and white mixed, aka not actually what people consider black? His father's from Kenya. His mother is Hawaiian. So he's white, and he grew up, his mother married an Indonesian man, and he lived in Indonesia for a time. And he was actually raised and went to mosque there in Indonesia. It's the largest Muslim country in the world, not Iran, not Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. But Obama is not Arab. He's mixed. Thank you, Carla. I appreciate that. I'm as educated as I can be. Hasn't been a while. And I'm in a new place anyways. So far, no spiders, knock on wood. What was the deadliest weapon from the Middle Ages? The crossbow. Crossbow was the shock RPG of its time. And that's not even to mention all the instruments of torture like the Iron Maiden or the drawing and quartering instrument, things like that. My information source is not Wikipedia. It's between here and here. How do you become more knowledgeable about history? Well, first you subscribe, like, and subscribe, and you follow my short form, long form content, because I do daily history videos. I did Who Died Today in History. I do Who Was Born Today in History, and I usually give more information about them. And I do random videos whenever I get the lead. And whenever there's a special event or something, I do a video, like Martin Luther King Day. I'm doing a full length video and a live stream lecture about his life. So obviously, me and many of the other great YouTube history channels is one way to do it if you're more of a visual learner or an audio-visual learner. Of course, reading is huge. I think the way to get interested in history is to look for different things. Look for those connections. Look for fun facts. Look for strange stories. Weird History and Captivating History do videos where they find these parallels and these themes and these weird behaviors. And something that always fascinates me is how humans behave the same or relatively the same regardless of where they are. There are more pyramids in South America than there are in Egypt. And they were built around the same time or a little bit afterwards with no knowledge of each other. Figure that out. There are megaliths, there are legends of floods and giants and all these things because, and of course we talked about this on the live stream, like the Q&A yesterday. There is this idea of something of a need for some sort of religious control, a spiritual life amongst the people, regardless of wherever they are in the world. So maybe that's what appeals to you. Maybe it's studying about the human condition. Maybe it's just being able to tell funny stories, because there's plenty of funny stories, like how Robespierre was actually killed after he'd been shot and put on trial with him bleeding and screaming in agony because the French Revolution that had become totally irrational still needed reason in order to convict him, because no man got a trial without a jury, even a man who was bleeding to death in front of them. So, Fidel, great to see you. I'm always glad you're here. World War II weapon technology. Sure, Lemon, what do you want to know? Happy to talk about it. V2 rockets, stuff like that. Werner von Braun. That's what I think of. Of course, I also think of the A-bomb. I think about bomber planes and things like that. Stuff they really didn't have. I think about what did they not have in World War I and what had they perfected since World War I. So the tank was really, really unusable in World War I because it kept breaking down until the Battle of the Somme. And the British called it the tank so the Germans wouldn't know what it was. And by the time World War II came around, the Panzer was the best and the Sherman was second best. But the Americans were able to produce so much more that they were able to overwhelm the Germans despite having tanks that were not as good. So, Historians Anonymous meets Tuesday. I haven't been to a meeting for Historians Anonymous in a while, but if you're addicted to history like me, then maybe that's where you need to go. Thank you, Taylor. I love having you here. Okay. Yeah, I haven't done, yeah, Silent, I only do that on the weekdays. So today's a weekend, so I'm not doing that right now. Jamaican, great to see you, Leroy. The Ottoman Empire enslaved millions of Europeans. When asked why, they said, we are infidels and the Quran allows them to. Yes, that's absolutely true. In fact, the Muslims created the African slave trade that the Africans were already wheeling and dealing in before the Europeans got there. The Europeans had the technology and the high demand that depopulated Africa, which unfortunately left Africa extremely susceptible to colonization by the Europeans in the 19th century, Germany, France, England, Belgium, places like that. The truth of the matter is, though, that the Ottoman Empire enslaved millions of white Europeans. The Berber peoples, known as the Barbary pirates, would enslave people who wouldn't pay their taxes. They would seize ships and cargo. The first war the U.S. ever fought in 1807 under Thomas Jefferson was the Barbary Coast War, and it was where the Marine uniforms were created with a white collar above the neckline to protect them as a symbol that they couldn't be beheaded. It was to protect their neck from being beheaded during that war, interestingly enough. So that was because to resist enslavement. So yes, a bunch of Europeans were enslaved and served in the Muslim elite guard known as the Janissaries. The Muslims cannot enslave other Muslims. Sunni and Shiites enslave each other because they don't think that they're true Muslims. And of course, you also have the Ottomans enslaving the Janissaries. You have harem slaves who are European, usually males who are castrated and then used in the harems of the Sultan. Some of these became very powerful and wise men, and some families actually wanted their boys to become slaves so that they could get a chance to work in the Ottoman government, and it was better than being a poor peasant. But yes, basically the Quran says you can't enslave, you can enslave an infidel, but not a fellow Muslim. So that's ergo why the Africans were enslaved and why the Europeans were enslaved. So, hello, Daniel. Great to see you. I'm doing my best to get through the chat as fast as I can. I've got a lot of questions, so if you don't feel that I'm answering your question in a timely manner, please wait. I promise to get there. I really appreciate the great showing we're having tonight. We've got back to where we needed to be with viewership and everything. We've got our lights. We've got the coffee mug. If you're enjoying any of this, please like and subscribe. Hello, Daniel. It's great to see you. People will never be satisfied. Imperfection. Yeah. And I just roll with the imperfections because I know I'm imperfect, and so is everybody who's telling me how imperfect I am. Yeah, I do have a smoker. I do have a pipe, and I have done a couple of videos about smoking jackets and their history. I did one for this channel. I did one for my Patreon, and yeah, that's where the smoking jacket actually comes from. Speaking of the Ottomans, the British and the French, especially the British, after the Crimean War, where they actually allied with the Ottomans to defeat the Russians in the 1850s, the British officers would come back with Turkish tobacco as a reward, and they would put it in their pipe and smoke it, literally. And they would smoke it after dinner and things like that, and they would go out into the yards and things like that, or into a parlor, and they would put on a jacket so they would keep their clothes from getting the stench and the debris of the tobacco on it, and that's where they get the smoking jacket. But because this was something that the British upper class were doing, the smoking jacket has become something that's used in more upper class circles and has become a fine-tuned dressing gown or robe. So yes, I do have a pipe and I do smoke it. I'm not going to be smoking it in here. I have done it in. I've smoked in the channel before. I've smoked a cigar. I did that when I did a Churchill live stream lecture. That was a lot of fun. But if I ever do a live stream outside, just a nice sunny day, and I want to do it or something like that, I'll have my pipe with me, and because I'm going to wear this until it gets too hot to wear it, basically. So. Yeah, Playboy guy, Hugh Hefner. Ryan. Basinski was a Polish-born artist. Grew up as a child during World War II. In the 1950s, he started photography, eventually moving into painting. Interesting. And is he more abstract? Ben Shapiro. Yeah, I can talk faster than Ben Shapiro, and I'm better looking. Sirac. Hey, great to see you. And thank you, Global, for what you're saying. That's really going to help us. Subscribing. Boy, we've got a lot to catch up on, but we're going through it as best we can. I promise I will get to your comments and questions as soon as I possibly can. Let me see here. Where was I? Okay. He wished he was Jesus. Italy sucks at war because when they ask for more shells, they bring ziti. Well, as an Italian, that's not always the case. The largest group, despite the persecution of Italians here in the United States because of them being on the side of the Axis powers, more Italian Americans signed up than any other ethnic group to fight during World War II. And they were actually fighting their cousins in Sicily and the coast of Italy. And there was actually fighting that eventually stalled in northern Italy because the Germans set up a government under Mussolini after he'd been thrown out of power that kept the Italians an Italian front near the Pyrenees and the Alps. Or not the Pyrenees, the Alps. So I am not smoking technically, but Elva Vu is asking, what are your thoughts on the Germans that were scientists and given pardons after the atrocities they did in wars? I think that it was one of these things. The US and the Soviets did it. We called it Operation Paperclip. It's well documented. They were brought over all over the United States. Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Los Angeles is an example of this. Some of them worked on NASA. Some of them helped the Americans get to the moon. Werner von Braun is an example. I mentioned him already. There were tons of German scientists who the Soviets and the Americans brought and gave immunity so that they can continue their research on super weapons and chemical weapons. There was a horrifying element to what people saw, but there was also this element of almost a morbid curiosity of what the Germans were actually doing. And that is why it's one of the most darkly mysterious parts of World War II. They got immunity, they got to live a whole life. The Jews that they killed, did the experiments they ran, not so much. Mengele was able to escape and live in Brazil for the rest of his life. So, yep, I am grown up Sheldon Cooper. I've gotten that hundreds of times. Yeah, that's true, C-Dot. I could always bring up Assassin's Creed or a game like that. Okay, Daniel, thank you. Uh-huh. That's true. Documentaries, movies, there are plenty of different things. Hey, Nazir, good to see you. I'm sorry I'm being quiet. I'm just going for the chat, trying to see questions here. Yep, Fair Lady Z, I love that quote. From Lithuania. See, we've got people from all over the world. People come all over. I love Lithuania, such a fascinating place. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of the most powerful European countries in the 17th century. Hi, can you explain the transatlantic slave trade? Now, Sir, I kind of already did, but basically, using the fast ships and better technology that they had adapted, the Europeans took millions of slaves in a triangle. It's called triangular trade, and it was called the Middle Passage because it's the middle part of a triangle. But from Africa, they would bring slaves to the New World for goods that they made in Europe. In the New World, the slaves would work on plantations for cash crops like tobacco and cotton. Cotton would be sent back to Europe to make textiles, clothing, and furniture that would then be sold to the Africans for more slaves. So millions of slaves were brought, most of them by Portugal and Spain. Most of them were brought to South America, and of course, the most well-known portion of this is those who were brought to America during the 13 colonies and even during the first few years of the United States until 1808. The United States brought slaves from Africa and continued that slave trade. So, okay, founding fathers. Richard wants to know about the founding fathers. So, obviously, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson on the right, and Ben Franklin, they helped write the Declaration of Independence. George Washington leads the colonial army into success. They are able to create a free society with independence and rights for all, except for minorities, Native Americans, slaves, freed blacks, and women. It's a complicated structure, it's a complicated system, and there's a lot of internal paradoxes and contradictions between what the founders wanted and desired for supposedly all people and how they treated women and slaves. And you got the Declaration of Independence, and you've got the Constitution. You have these high ideals of Jefferson and Adams and Madison, and you have the United States struggling then and struggling now to actually live up to that standard. So it's a standard, it's an ideal, it's the American idea that America was founded on. It's all that great flag waving stuff, but America hasn't always been good at putting its money where its mouth is. And the founding fathers weren't. Fighting for liberty while owning slaves really doesn't look good, especially in the eyes of 21st century Americans. But we weren't there, and history is a foreign country with a particular, with their own language, customs, and beliefs and ideas. So, no, Mick, I don't get exactly into where I am, so you can keep guessing. A lot of powerful people are high-ranked Masons. I've heard about that. That's true. We do need more mods. We have our mods, but they're not here today. So, let me see here. Straight people have caused more harm to the world than gays. Well, Mick, yeah, that's technically true in the sense that, but it's not because they were straight. And gay people harming the world wasn't because they were gay necessarily. It's all proportionality. If only 5 to 10% of the world's population has been or is gay, then of course proportionally you're going to have straight people doing more damage. But it's not because they're straight necessarily. They tried using the Irish for slavery. Not quite slavery. They called it indentured servitude, Richard, where they would actually sell them. They would buy passage and a new life in the New World, but they'd have to work for 7 years of free labor. But why are only Abrahamic religions hate gays? It's because homosexuality is crafted through slavery, being they attracted to the male slaves, so all homosexuals came from a desert. I'm not sure if any of that is true. It's not only the Abrahamic religions. I don't know about the specifications for Hinduism or Eastern religions when it comes to homosexuality, but it's something that has generally had an antithetical relationship to religion. And you could say today there are many gay Christians and gay Jews who are either openly or unopen or not so openly living their life and finding a way to balance that out And the West, in particular the United States and Canada, and now Europe too, has become extraordinarily accepting of these things. And Israel is an example of this, where you have a really strong conservative or ultra-Orthodox Jewish population that lives side by side with really, really, really openly proud people, like in Tel Aviv, which has the world's largest Pride celebration every June. So there's a lot of religious freedom, toleration, all of these ideas are not explicitly Western, but the Westerners have crafted them so that their countries, despite having such religious histories, can actually be a place where people, minorities, women, and homosexual people feel welcomed. So, let me see here. Thank you, Richard. I took a sip. I bet I can. Yes, you can. You can also put a credit card between the gap in my teeth, but I don't take MasterCard. Yeah, the UK is fascinating. Just such a great. Am I Jewish? No, I am not Jewish. I have a lot of affinity and love and understanding of the Jewish culture, religion, and life, but I am not Jewish. Can you prove that by giving? I heard from some people that history helps the nations learn from the mistakes of others. Can you prove? Yes, there is truth of that. That if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it. But it's one of those historical phrases I'm not crazy about. I don't believe, for instance, there's a wrong or right side of history. I don't believe that history repeats itself. I've talked about this numerous times on the channel, and I don't believe that history is just there for lessons. History is there to learn about what it means to be human and how humans lived. And if you can garner lessons from that, absolutely. So, yeah, I do think it's true to some extent that if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. And so I wrote an article about this on my Substack comparing Donald Trump to Andrew Jackson. Check that out if you'd like. But yeah, can I prove it by giving an example? Well, I think a huge example of that has happened in many cultures is when a country, an empire, is starting to struggle, it decides to devalue its currency and basically says that it says that we're going to reprint as much coinage or money as we possibly can in order to balance out our economic needs and our demands. The Romans did this with the bread and circuses, where they basically had a welfare state, but in order to subsidize it through coinage and to pay their armies, they printed more and more coins. Well, they didn't have all the silver and gold in the world to print these coins, so how did they do it instead? Well, they devalued their currency, putting in copper and bronze and tin and making their silver and gold coins more and more impure while still passing them off. Right now, the Americans are struggling with this because part of the inflationary problem is the hyperspending of the American government. And this has happened, and I'm not just making a political point. This has happened many times in history. The Yuan dynasty in China collapsed because they printed too much money to fight their wars. The Greeks struggled with this. Different civilizations struggle with this. You become corrupt, they spend too much. Germany, obviously, after World War I, at the collapse of the German Empire, struggled with this. So the truth of the matter is, that is history that you need to learn from, or it seems like you're doomed to repeat it, or at least have it rhyme. Like Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme a lot. Are you also doing trades? I don't know what you mean by that. I know this is saying too much, but would a Mason and Egyptian get along? I don't know. No, I am not. I'm just trading information for you liking and subscribing. Hello, good to see you. Did you go to university? Yes, I did. I have a bachelor's and a master's. What is your opinion on the droid attack on the Wookiees? Ki-Adi-Mundi is one of the worst Star Wars Jedi, even though he's my favorite because he has 2 brains in his skull. So yes, I am a Star Wars nerd. And yes, what about the droid attack on the Wookiees? Yes. I don't know what that is, but I'd have to look into that. Let me see. And yes, become a friendly neighborhood historian by liking and subscribing. Ryan's got the right idea. And if I'm not responding, it's only because I'm reading through all of the trash and trolling and stuff like that to try to find gold nuggets of questions. Jews did not cause the Second World War. That doesn't make any sense. Go home. Obama's father is from Kenya. I'm going to start going. Hello, Johnny. Welcome to the Friendly Neighborhood History channel. This is where it's our live stream Q&A, where we do every Friday and Saturday, where we answer your questions about history and social studies. Same thing, Monica. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Do you know who Klaus von Stauffenberg is? I do not. I would like to know more. Do I like firearms? Yes. I mean, it's part of being a historian and studying arms and armor. Let me see here. The fires in LA have nothing to do with America's international wars, Hasib. Spartacus, always great to see you. I'm glad you're enjoying the stream. How do you respond to people that say the ancient Egyptians are black? Well, I mean, it's this, okay, I don't, it's tough for me because in a way they are, and in a way they're not. And it's hard, and I feel bad saying that as a white person who's black and who's not black. They have African DNA in them, but sub-Saharan Africa and the Maghreb, North Africa, Tunisia, Libya, these places have been fundamentally distinct from each other, and Egypt is the crosshairs literally between the two largest continents, Africa and Asia. Yes, the Middle East is technically in Asia. It's also the crossroads between the Middle East and Africa. So Egypt has been at this liminal stage for an extremely long time. In fact, on the Suez Canal itself, there are two cities across from each other, divided by the canal. One is Africa, one is Asia in the Middle East. I think it's Port Said is in Africa and Port Fouad is in Asia, Middle East. So the Egyptians are technically African. I mean, the line of Ptolemaic pharaohs under Cleopatra were Greek or Grecian, at least. Greeks intermarried with native Egyptians. The Kushites and the Nubians conquered Egypt. Those are black Africans from the Sahara. So the Maghreb has been distinct. It's been controlled by Muslims. It's had a very, very different history and experience than the rest of Africa. And there's a lot of cultural and religious and linguistic differences between the people of Northern Africa and the people of Sahara and Sub-Saharan Africa. So it's not quite fully fair to say that Egyptians are only black, but they are at least partially black. Yeah. Anyways, did Nazi Germany find Italy as a liability? At first they didn't, but Mussolini's incursions and lack of success and the Italians basically giving up and everything really led to some problems, and basically the Nazis just kind of took the reins away from them. I'm not sure, I'm not sure if that's true. Oh wow, SK, I hope you enjoy yourself. Kaiserlautern. The German language is full of compound words, so that's Kaiser, Emperor. And today is the anniversary of the founding of the German Empire in 1871, by the way. I do know a lot about history, Hasib. I'm going to garner a little bit more than you might know. The Roman Empire started Islam. No. Islam was founded in the late 500s. The Western Roman Empire was already collapsed for over a century. The Eastern Roman Empire was thoroughly Christian, and most of it was conquered by the Muslims. In fact, all of it was eventually conquered by the Muslims when the Ottomans destroyed Constantinople in 1453. So the Roman Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantines did not start Islam. But good question. Thank you everyone for the good questions and good feedback and everything. And if you're actually serious, and thank you for enduring the trolls, I'm doing my best to endure them. Consider liking and subscribing, all that great stuff. Not sure, Ghost Girl. I don't know what you mean by that. Are you from? Yes, I am familiar with MK Ultra, where they basically put LSD into subways and sprayed it as a pesticide and exposed the American population to it to see what it would do. I am familiar about that, and that does sound like conspiracy theory, but the CIA and the government have admitted it happened. Yep, that's true. There was a lot of fighting in Indonesia with the British, and the native Indonesians eventually got their independence from the Dutch because, like the Vietnamese and Filipinos, they fought and resisted the Japanese, and then afterwards were like, we're done with these imperialist wars, give us our own country. Sukarno was his name. Sargon of Akkad, yes, the first major ruler of the Mesopotamians who took Sumeria and made it an actual kingdom by conquering. At that point, it was a series of city-states. He conquered a bunch of the city-states and started to build the first, I think it's called the Ancient Babylonian Empire. So, it is a robe, technically a dressing gown called a smoking jacket, and it is used for people who smoke, or at least in the 19th century it was. Now it's just a fancy dressing gown, but people would use this to smoke pipe tobacco. Is it true that U.S. Marines started to shave their hair so the enemy cannot scalp them? I've heard that. want to think it's a historical myth that I'll do a history myth video on, because I do history myth videos. I did you know videos, stuff like that. I'm not 100% sure, Fidel, but it's interesting. I've heard that before. Yeah, Carl, we'll see about that. Nope, I hate to disappoint you, but there is a bunch of clothing under this, and it's why I'm kind of warm, which is why the iced coffee helps. Eritrea. I used to know what that is. I don't know anymore. Let me see here. What are your thoughts on Sargon of Akkad? I answered your question. Again, I'm trying to go through this. Hello from Chile. Great to see you. If anyone sees Tom Arnold, tell him. Yeah, okay. Roseanne, thank you. We'll be sure to tell him. What do you think of Napoleon? Was he a military dictator, popularly put in that position, or a bit of both? Both. I think he became a dictator after he's popularly put in that position. He always saw himself as the continuation of the French Revolution, and I've talked a lot about Napoleon. I've done live stream lectures on Napoleon last week. I think it was last week, so we talked about the French Revolution, or the week before, so check that out. But basically, Napoleon saw himself as the continuation of the French Revolution. He updated the legal code that became the major legal code for Europe, for the West. Up until this day, they still use the Napoleonic legal code in law cases. It's gold standard, just like Justinian's code was before him, from the Emperor Justinian. But basically, Napoleon took a lot of the revolutionary ideas like liberalism, democracy, the freedom of speech, freedom of religion, emancipation of slavery with him to these places where he would go, but he obviously wanted to be the one who did it. He was the only one in charge, and he did rule as a dictator. So it's kind of confusing to people when they think that Napoleon was this guy who actually wanted to spread democracy, but there is some truth to that. Let me see here. I'll have to look into him. Benzinski, thank you, Ryan. Italy had units on the Eastern Front. They didn't go far. You missed a bunch of trolling and me answering a bunch of history questions. Well, I'm Italian, as in my maternal side of the family is Italian. I've never lived in Italy, but I would be very tempted to do so. Let me see. Yes, Alone Wolf, the fact that you're using all caps just means that you're probably incorrect. Yes, I'm sorry, but it's good to have you here, amazing, energetic Joshua. AEJ. Russian Empire did a lot of bad things. They have serfs and all sorts of stuff. And David, I am here, so you can stop complaining now. Eddie, I think they could have, but I think they blew their chances. I think losing at Gettysburg was obviously their beginning of their undoing, and I think that they were fighting an uphill battle from the beginning, so it was already really hard, Eddie. Thank you, TJ. I really appreciate that. Well, you do know a lot about history, and I'm glad you're here. Let me see. Mimo is saying America needs to wake up and take what's ours. I don't know about that. Thoughts on Heidler's escape from Europe through Switzerland over to Italy, takes a submarine to Brazil and lived out his days in peace and comfort. I mean, that's what Mengele did. I mean, it's a horrifying thing. They were able to hunt down a lot of these guys like Eichmann. The Mossad worked on that for a long time. So. Is there checks and balances? AIPAC? You mean the Jewish organization? Well, it's Israelis who live in it's people who live in the United States. That's why. What's the history of the Bermuda Triangle, and is that a myth of missing air flights? Yeah, the Bermuda Triangle, there was a group of, so the original story comes from 17. There was a ship that got blown off course and probably crashed near Bermuda, and ever since then there's been this history of disappearing ships, missing flights, things like that, and it's just kind of a mystery. We don't exactly know what happened, but I'm sure they landed somewhere. I mean, I don't think there's like a black hole or anything there. Where is Noah's Ark? I have no idea. Yes, Eddie, that's true. That's why, that's true. I don't know if we've ever met. Harry is saying we call Augustus the first emperor, but legally Caesar his adopted father. So wouldn't Caesar? No, because Caesar was trying to make himself dictator for life. The senators didn't want that, so they killed him, and Augustus eventually became emperor in his stead. No, because Augustus assumed titles like princeps, which means the first among equals, and eventually imperator. In fact, he assumed the name Augustus, which means revered one. And so there was no empire, and there were two civil wars after Caesar was killed to figure out who would be on top, and eventually Octavian became the one to take the reins. So. Yes, that's true. There is the jizya, which forces people to be submissive. What happens if they don't pay it, though? Even though, yeah. Scooby-Doo. Okay, that one was kind of funny. I'll give that one to you. Although you shouldn't be doing it in all caps. Yes, Melody, it's great to have you here in the channel. I'm glad that I'm safe, and I'm glad I'm doing what I can. Yep, you're absolutely right, Rebo. Famous polymaths. Oh, people who studied a bunch of different things. I would say Aristotle, obviously, is probably the OG polymath. Newton, despite math and science, different things like that. He wrote books on religion too. So, the samurai sword dude is called the katana. Egyptians are black, let alone back then. No, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily slaves. They could have been, but you could have had a large force of people who were forced labor. We're not 100% sure. Thank you, TJ. See you. Did European power come backfired when made America independent? Did European power backfire? Yeah, it backfired on the French, who had a revolution, MDJ, because they helped the Americans with everything, and because they helped the Americans, they ruined their economy to embarrass the British. And so, like Thanos would say, what did it cost you? Everything. So it did backfire, and the British just built their empire by going to Australia and other places. They didn't think the world was going to end, Sankey. That's not necessarily true. It's a myth to say that. But their calendar just happened to end. They probably just stopped making them, and they disappeared under much more mysterious circumstances than their calendar ending. Yes. It was a Serbian nationalist who wanted Serbia to be independent from the Austro-Hungarians and didn't want them around. And they also wanted Bosnia to be independent, and the Austro-Hungarians had taken over Bosnia. And when Archduke Franz Ferdinand drove through the streets, he was assassinated, and that's what led to it. What if Europe never gave up America? Well, I don't know. The British could have kept fighting, but I don't know if the guerrilla warfare tactics that the Americans, backed up by the French and the Spanish, who were continually willing to fight, probably it wasn't going to go anywhere. It just seemed like it was going to be a mess. Pyramids were built probably between 3000 and 2500 BC. Here's Rodolfo, my wonderful moderator. Show him some love in the chat. Make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying what we're talking about. Was the Alexandra one the fight India? I don't know what you mean by that. Is it true the French kept Napoleon's? Yes, I've heard that story before, that they kept his private parts in a box. I'm not sure how much more of that is true. I've been going down the rabbit hole of old Chinese history, in particular the Civil Wars. It's absolutely insane if you haven't had the opportunity. Yes, I love learning about Eastern history, and I love learning about China, and I'm actually starting a series about Chinese emperors, so consider checking that out. Tell us about farming revolution. Are you talking about the Green Revolution of the late 1700s, when all of a sudden there was farming? It was the 16 and early 1700s, where all of a sudden new technology in agriculture allowed a lot of people to farm when they hadn't been able to before, and it allowed people to live and all of that stuff. Basically, it kept people from dying, and it improved health conditions, it improved dietary and nutrition conditions, which allowed people to live longer lives. That's supposedly where it is. I don't know where Mount Ararat is though. Yes, it was neither holy nor Roman nor an emperor, village or gamer. That's what Voltaire said. That sounds like something Trump would do. Global, holy. No, the Holy Roman Empire was helped created by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, you could say, replaced the Roman Empire because of their influence over Europe and its political and religious and spiritual affairs. Hello, So Real TV, great to see you. I'm trying to speed run through the channel, get everything. Jaden, also good to see you. Yeah, Augustus was despised, but he was also more patient than his uncle, adoptive father, who was kind of arrogant and leaning on his own hubris after defeating all of his enemies and didn't see it coming. That's very true, Mary. A lot of people were very unsure about Augustus. Freshly, it's great to see you. How do you feel about the U.S. failures in Vietnam and Afghanistan? The U.S. can't fight guerrilla warfares, and we don't always intervene for good. There you go. I'm speed rounding it so I can get through as much of these as I possibly can. Who came first, Alexander the Great or Genghis Khan? Alexander the Great by about 1,500 years. What would consider 21st historic that will go down in history? I mentioned it already, 9/11, the election of Donald Trump, the election of Barack Obama, the October 7th attacks, I think will be up there, the Arab Spring, things like that. Obviously, the rapid development of China. Which army would win if peak Rome fought peak Genghis Khan? Probably peak Genghis Khan because of the horse archers and the advantage from that. Well, Thomas, I didn't see those comments about, and I finally caught up. Wow, look at that. Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. Thomas, I didn't see those comments. So the Balfour Declaration was the British foreign minister. It's a very short document, only a couple of paragraphs, where Lord Balfour basically declares near the end of World War I that the Jews who have been relocating for about 40 years to Palestine had a right to have a nation of their own in Palestine like they had 3,000 years before that. That's all it says. And the Havara Agreement, I've heard of that. I used to know what it is. I don't know what it is anymore. If I don't know what something is, I'm just going to say it. I'm trying to catch up on the chat because we're over an hour in, and I'm actually going overtime to answer all of your questions. So Thomas, if you could bring that up and tell me what the Havara Agreement is, I would be happy to learn more about that. So all is knowledge, but do you know Jesus is God? Because without Jesus, your purpose and study is worth nothing, and you need to serve him. Okay. Thank you, Truth. I appreciate that and the spirit it's given. So anyways. Thank you for subscribing, Thomas. I appreciate that. Causes of World War I and World War II. Well, technically, I think there are 3 world wars. There's one in the 1750s, but we usually call the 7 Years' War or the French-Indian War here in the States, where there was fighting in North America, there was fighting in India, off the coast of Africa, and in Europe, and all the colonies were involved as well, just like with World Wars II and III, might I say. World War I starts because of what I talked about with the Archduke Franz Ferdinand being assassinated, which basically makes Austria-Hungary attack Serbia. Russia backs up Serbia, only to have Germany attack Russia, and France is allied to Russia. So France and Russia are competing with Germany and Austria-Hungary. Germany runs through Belgium to knock out the French so they can turn on the Russians. The British hate the violation of Belgian neutrality, and they join on the side of the French. So you have Britain, France, and Russia against Germany and Austria-Hungary in a 2-front war. Next year, Italy will join. 1917, the US will join, Britain, France, and Russia. Russia will get knocked out of the war because of the Bolshevik Revolution. There's horrifying trench warfare using mustard gas, tanks, airplane fighting, heavy artillery and shells, where men basically run out into a field called no man's land from their trenches in order to gain very small amounts of land and die for almost nothing, almost no gain. In the eastern front of the war, the British will use the Arabs as a way to take out the Ottomans and destabilize them. Greece will join the war on the side of the Allies, as will Romania, and Bulgaria will join the Central Powers, as they're called, because there's Central Europe, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, which joins to restore its land in southeastern Europe, aka the Balkans, where this whole mess started in Serbia when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was killed. Many would say for World War II or World War III, in my opinion, that war was caused by World War I/II, because the Treaty of Versailles with the Germans, after the German surrender, punished the Germans, make them pay off war debt, and make them accept full responsibility for the war. This national humiliation is used by the Nazis to antagonize the German people during the Great Depression, when Germany's economy is already completely collapsed because the American and British economy have collapsed. And so because of it, basically the Nazis use that as a rallying cry to turn on their enemies, especially their ethnic enemies, especially the Jews, also communists, homosexuals, people with mental disabilities, and Slavs, as well as Romani, gypsy people. So, the truth of the matter, and I shouldn't say gypsy, but the truth of the matter is World War II is caused by that. The Americans get involved in the war because Japan, who was helping the Axis powers, took French territory, because France gets knocked out of the war quickly by Germany, and Italy wants to take more land in Africa, so that's why I was talking about earlier with Ethiopia. America gets involved because Japan takes French territories in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, called Indochina, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, and then the Americans embargo them, cut off their oil supply, knowing that they might attack them, and they attack them at Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. That brings the Americans into the war. The Soviets initially helped the Germans divide up Poland when the war starts in 1939, but eventually Hitler decides to invade the Soviet Union in 1941, which ends up backfiring. So that's a quick background on the causes of these two wars. So, let me see here. And now I'm behind in the chat, so I'm going to catch up, and then we're going to wrap it up. Where was I? But Sonia, I hope that answered your question. How come AIPAC does not register as a foreign agent as per federal law? Are we even, there should be checks and balances. There should be all these things. It's part of the American constitutional system. I think you mean AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee. I think it's because there are Americans who have organized that committee for political action, and they're non-political, at least they're non-partisan. What do you think of judging historical figures from today's morals, or do you think we should look at them through? I think, Harry, we can judge them from today's morals and say, well, that's not a good thing. That's obviously not a good thing that Columbus thought it was a good idea to enslave natives. But I think we also have to look at the context of how people thought in their time. So I think you need both. Plant-based, because you have Italian ancestry, spicy meatballs. There you go. It's a me, a Mario, and a Luigi, my brother. Okay, that was probably horrible, and I'm sorry. Yeah, please take a look at Troy Hawk Reader's Guild. He is very similar to you, wears the same smoke. Interesting. I'll have to take a look. No one trolls Rodolfo. That's my rule. Are you aware of the Holodomor, the assassination of the Romanovs? Yes, I'm a Russian historian. That's actually my emphasis. My master's was in the Great Game, Russia and Britain's competition for Afghanistan and central control in Central Asia in the 19th century and early 20th century. Yes, the Romanovs were killed by the Bolsheviks because they were worried they would be a rallying cry for the Russian people. And then after that, you have the Holodomor is Stalin's forced collectivization of farmland and his 5-year plans, which eventually leads to millions of people starving to death in the Ukraine and Russian and Western Russia. How big was the British Empire's peak? How many countries fall under it? Dozens. And the largest empire, arguably, in human history. And it's not a contiguous land empire like the Mongols. It's not an ancient empire like the Romans or Alexander. Largest empire in history when you consider just how much land it accumulated. Canada, and this is not even the United States, the Atlantic seaboard it controlled, but Canada, Australia, South Africa, Ireland, Nigeria, Nigeria, Egypt, Kenya, Ghana, areas like that. That's why they speak English there. Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad you're here. And maybe you can spread the word on those other channels. And I'm happy you're here. How come? Well, that's because political action communities are different here in the United States, where there's no limits on how much money political action committees can give to a government or something like that. Is your knowledge of geography on par with your knowledge of history? I try my best. I don't know as much, but I know a lot. And I have a really nice globe here, but it's from the 80s, so it's got Soviet Union on it. How come AIPAC does not? Yes, we've heard that question before. When you were referring to the 7 Years' War as the First World War, yes, I was. And I think that's backed up by the French-Indian War. It's backed up by the fighting of the Fayatorias in Africa, and the British and French pitting Indian rulers called Rajas against each other. So, thank you. I'm digging that you're here, JR. Thank you, David Dundee. I'm giving it up for you. I appreciate you listening and not just coming in here to troll and enjoying yourself. So it looks like we are wrapping it up. What do I think of the British Empire overall? I think it was really big, really impressive, and was buoyed by its strong navy. And if you didn't have the British Empire, what would you have had to stop the Nazis necessarily? But at the same time, you have a colonialism, you have a social Darwinism, you have a racism and discrimination. There is a balancing act here. So, 24, yeah, it's huge, a third. It's the sun never set, because it could be nighttime in Canada, but daytime in South Africa. So the sun literally never set on the British Empire. USSR, know a lot about it. I do not, Craig. I haven't done that in like 2 years. Yes, I agree, Thomas. I love what you're saying. You're preaching to the choir here. Good evening. Great to see you. Magnus, so good to see you. Defoe, what can I do? And the Dutch bolstered the British Empire, absolutely, especially when they basically kicked the VOC out and took over with the British East India Company. So I have once again, doing a speed round, caught up. I really appreciate all the wonderful participation. It has been an awesome live. I agree, Ben 10. We're at an hour and 12 minutes. Thank you for joining us. It's 8:30 on the East Coast. Go out and have a fun night and everything. And join us tomorrow for our live stream lecture, where we will be talking about the history of the English Civil War and things like that. Like, subscribe, spread the word, follow those socials, show some love to my moderator, Rodolfo, and everything. Yes, yes, that's true, Magnus. I'm trying my best. I'm trying to do a little bit shorter. Dulfi, you got your shout out. I will slow down. I promise, Magnus. I slowed down earlier today. So, yes, I did, Ryan. I'm going to look into him after this. And thanks for joining me for the entertaining show. I will take one more question. Our last call, and then join us tomorrow for the live stream lecture, and then Monday for yet another live stream lecture. Thank you, Sonia. I appreciated your questions. Yes, the interregnum. Yes, I'm sure you look just as regal, Noah, so thank you so much. My source of information. Reading, stuff I learned in college, books, videos. I watch history YouTube videos just like you guys do, and hopefully you guys enjoy my history YouTube videos, so check that out. Yeah, I'm just trying to learn as much as I possibly can. I learn a lot from you guys. Sometimes you guys are my source. You guys give me information and topics I hadn't learned about, and I go back and learn about them, and then I gain stuff like I have to learn about the Harvara and Bekinski now because of you guys. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to call it at that. Take care and have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care and love history. Have a good night. Oh yes, we'll make that happen. Good night, everybody.